Welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I'm Beth Bailey, and today I'm excited to welcome Parwani, a former colonel in the Afghan National Army's Special Forces. Colonel Parwani was the Director of Intelligence within the ANSF's Joint Special Operations Command leading up to the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. He arrived in the U.S. in August of 2021, and he found his calling when he joined the Afghanistan United Front, or AUF, an effort led by former General Sami Sadat. The AUF hopes to use its political, civil, and military fronts to present an alternative government that could unseat the Taliban. Colonel Parwani, it's so great to have you here today to share your really emotional and very important story of what you've been through in the last 2 years. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Thank you for having me here.
It is my pleasure. I'd love to start by asking about when you joined the Afghan military and what inspired your decision to be part of that effort.
So I would like to start that my late father was a colonel with the Afghan army, and also the situation back then in Afghanistan when I freshly graduated from high school, the situation was really worse in Afghanistan. We had intensive fighting all over the country, like in the north, south, east, west. And that is back 2012. So I decided to join the Afghan army to follow the footsteps of my father and serve my country.
And did you immediately join the Special Forces, or what was that process like?
So after going to school, in military school in Kabul, then graduating from military school, I joined the military intelligence. So I became an intelligence officer. Then after coming to the United States and going to school and going back to Afghanistan, I joined the special forces.
So when you were here in the US for schooling, can you tell me what and where you studied and how long you were here and how you felt about the US when you were here?
I came to the United States back in 2014. I went to school in Texas, San Antonio. That I call Texas and San Antonio my second house. I have lots of friends there. And after that, I went to Fort Huachuca, Arizona for the military intelligence training. And I spent a year in the US back then.
What was it like for you? Did you enjoy it? Was it a big change from growing up in Afghanistan?
It was totally different for me because the culture is different, the food, the people. You're gonna when I came at the first, I saw like different people. Like especially, I had a cultural shock the first time when I came to the airport in Dallas. So that was the first time I was seeing. Women like walking with like not that much clothes on her. So that was a culture shock because it's in Afghanistan. The women and the girls were covering their bodies, and the first thing I saw at the airport was this lady with less clothes on her, and that was a cultural shock. Then I really liked it. I enjoyed the food. I found friends. Like I was going out with my friends all the time when I was in Texas. But unfortunately, when I went to Arizona for Huachuca, that I was saying when I was talking to my friends, I was like, "Hey, I'm here in Helmand at the United States," because of the place that we were in Huachuca City. So it was like local like Afghanistan. So I liked it, but we don't had much to do. But we had lots of. I had to study a lot because first of all, English was my second language. Then I was studying with uh, 52 American second lieutenants who were freshly graduated from the West Point or ROTC and other training centers that they came there. So I had to catch up with them because the class were built for these American officers, and I had to catch up with them. And luckily, I came at the top 10 of my class by then when we were graduating. So I was busy with the studying when I went to Fort Huachuca.
That's really incredible. That's a big achievement. When you came back, so I imagine it's 2015, 2016 when you returned to
Yeah.
Afghanistan. What was the fighting like when you arrived?
So the fighting had increased. The unit that I was a part of it in Kabul was attacked in 2014. The place that I was working is called Sialsang. It was in PD8 of Kabul, and the Taliban tried to destroy or explode that with a car bomb that caused the casualty of 400 people were injured on the attack in that our HQ in PD8 of Kabul. So the fighting was intensive all around the country because the responsibilities, the security responsibilities from NATO was transferred to the Afghan security forces, and the Taliban were pushing and trying to attack and take control of some district centers and run over some CPs.
Wow. So you were in Kabul when you came back. How long were you there, and what was it like as things progressed and we got more towards the Doha Agreement being signed?
So after 2014, the election in 2014, the Afghan politicians were divided into two parts. There was two parties, one government. So now you have two people deciding what to do and what not to do. So if the president was saying that we're going to do this, then the other person who was sitting beside him was like, no, we are not going to do this. So we were divided. At the same time, the Taliban used this opportunity to start their attacks to gain some control of some district centers, CPs, and even they took control of some district centers within that time. So going forward from 2015, when I went to Kabul, I remember that the Taliban took control of Kunduz province at the north. Then they took control of Ghazni province. So the fighting was increased every day. We were seeing the Taliban's attacking more and more, and the attacks increased.
And at the same, so by the time you and I spoke about this the other day, and I definitely want listeners to hear this story. We fast forward to when the Doha Agreement gets signed, and at this point you were operating out of the combined situational awareness room, and I'd love you to talk about what that meant, what that work specifically entailed. But you were overseeing airstrikes in 2019, and I'd love for listeners to hear about that experience, and particularly how the number of US airstrikes shifted so dramatically from when you were first there until the following year after the Doha Agreement was signed, and why that whole story is so important.
Yeah, so I want to tell you what this CSAR was,
Mhm.
how we start the CSAR. Back in 2019, when Minister Khaled, who became the Minister of Defense, General Sami Sadat, my boss, uh, he became the military advisor for the Minister of Defense. And he, with General Miller, who was the NATO commander back then, they built this initiative that let's bring all these capabilities into under one room so we can, for the first time in the 20 years of Afghans and NATO forces, this initiative was the first initiative that Afghans and Americans were sitting together in one room, having all these aircraft flying over the country. And for the first time, the Americans were listening for the Afghans providing intelligence, and they were actioning based on those intelligence. So if I provide them any intelligence that, hey, we have an intelligence that the Taliban are gathered here and they want to attack this specific city, so they were listening to us. They were going to provide support an aircraft over there to strike. So we were doing air strikes over there. We were doing air support for the. We were providing air support for the Afghan special forces during the operations, and we were doing crisis response whenever we had a crisis going on over the country. So I can recall the number of the airstrike we conducted in 2019. We conducted over 7,243 airstrikes, only US airstrikes. We had Afghan airstrikes as well. That we cannot compare the numbers because we had a small air force that we were not able to conduct this much airstrikes comparing to the airstrikes that were conducted by the American aircrafts. And we were able to take control of 12 district centers that were controlled by Taliban with the help of the CSAR. And also the this led us to the this effort led the Taliban to come to the negotiation. And this brings the Taliban to the negotiation because the US were striking on the Taliban every night. Like we had over 20 aircraft flying over the country. And the Taliban, wherever they were attacking, they were getting shot.
Wow. So that's what brought them to the negotiating table for Doha, is what you're saying. And so,
Yes. So, as I said, like the Taliban had lots of casualties and lost. Like over 27,000 Taliban were killed, and the Taliban were decreasing, their numbers were decreasing, and the airstrikes were increasing every day. The number of attacks that the Taliban were conducting, it came to like 30% lower in 2019. If the Taliban were attacking were conducting 75 to 80 attacks before this CSAR, when we started CSAR, within the first 3 months, the number of attacks came to like 25 to 30 attacks per night.
wow. And then Doha happens. And
Yeah.
can you talk about how that changed things in the CSAR?
Yes. When the Doha Agreement signed, first of all, so before that we had this like 20 aircraft and we had a general sitting with us. Now you have three aircrafts within the country and you have a major or a captain sitting here with you, and the number of attacks has increased. It is doubled right now. If you had doubled or tripled, like we had 30 to 35 to 40 attacks in 2019. Now this number has increased to 170 to 200 attacks per night all over the country. Comparing the 2019, that all those aircrafts we had, now we have these like three or two aircrafts or four that are not capable of providing that much support for our or to respond for the crisis that we are facing. The Taliban had become brutal. So after the Doha Agreement, we were called to give peace a chance. For this, they told us to be an active defense. As an officer, I never find a good definition for an active defense. What is an active defense? I still don't know. So you can see your enemy walking in front of you, and you have been told that, hey, give peace a chance, let the Taliban do whatever they want to do, but you don't have to do anything because we want to give them a chance for a peace. Taliban uses this opportunity, first of all, to cut all the supply routes of our CPs all around the country, our bases, our CPs. They try to overrun the small CPs, cut the supply routes for the bases, and surround them.
And they did this. So there's one incident you told me about in Helmand in March of 2020 with these new rules of engagement. And it really showed you, I think, how little support you were going to get from the US in the future. Can you tell listeners about how that event went down?
I believe that was my worst experience working with the CSAR for over 15 months. That was my worst. We had seen like nights we lost so many of our bodies, but we never heard such a words from our counterpart or our American body. So in March of 2020, I received a call. It was around 9:30 at the night. I received a call from the 215 Corps talk that they told me that one of our CPs were under attack in Kajiki district of Helmand. So he passed me the grade for this checkpoint. Then uh, I passed it to my American counterpart. We had an aircraft flying nearby, so we shift the aircraft over there. It took us like 15 to 18 minutes to be on that CP. We saw that there is a fire coming out of the CP, the location that we had the grade for. So this fire is coming out of the CP. As soon as we got closer and we have good visual on the CP, we saw the Taliban fighters are coming out of the CP from two directions. And I told my American buddy, like, hey brother, these are the Taliban. We have to strike them. I can recall the words that he told me like, Parwani, they are not active danger anymore when we are not going to strike them. I was like, what does an active danger mean? There is no one that they can pose a danger to. They killed the soldiers. They put fire on the CP and they took all these equipments out of the CP. And the dead bodies are burned and we can see it. If you don't want to strike, please keep this, please close this screen. I don't want to watch it. I'm not here in a theater sitting and watching a movie. I'm here to support those guys in the ground, and you're telling me that these Taliban are not an active danger. I am angry with you because there is no one left to be in danger. They killed these soldiers. They took their weapons.
That had to be so disappointing. And I think it's important for listeners to understand, too, what the Doha Agreement said. And from my understanding, it said that the Taliban could not attack U.S. forces, but there was no restriction on what they could do against Afghan forces, was there?
I believe there was, but
Okay,
the first thing that they said in the Doha's agreement, and after the Doha's agreement, Taliban never attacked the U.S. forces.
right.
From the January 2020 until August 2021, there was no reports of an incident or attack on an American base or CP, even a soldier. But they had told them that we are going to defend the Afghan forces if you attack the bigger cities like provinces, like district centers, and also we gonna strike. So one more thing to be mentioned here. We were asking civilians to give us permission, not us, but my counterparts, American counterparts, were asking the civilians to give us permission to strike. We were asking Khaliza to give us permission if we can strike.
Why was that? Well, I mean, because
Well,
Khalil
I
Zad
believe
was.
that was part of the rules of engagement.
Mhm.
like
Oof.
politicians interfering the military and asking military what to do and what to not do. So, like in 2021 and 2022, the number of the Taliban's attack increased. Like I can tell you the number of attacks that were conducted from an 11 month of 2020. The Taliban conducted 48,600 attacks on the Afghan security forces. That include assassinations, that include car bombing, that include uh, massive attacks on the CPs and bases.
And at that time, they started to take more control, although that seemed to really happen up towards the end of the US's presence in Afghanistan, where those areas started to come under control. And by that point, flashing forward, you were in Helmand in the like summer, late spring of 2021. And can you talk about what you were doing in Helmand at the time and how you were preparing for the US to leave the country, or when you knew that the US was going to leave the country?
So I find out that after the Doha Agreement that the US was going to leave, and I believe, and we all believe that the Americans were one day are going to leave the country. So we could see every day, like after the Doha Agreement, all the supply shipments were cut. We did not receive the shipments of the ammunition, the guided rockets for our AC-28 aircraft, the bombs for our A-29 aircraft. All these things were stopped. We never received any shipments. So I remember on the August 6th when the first province, I believe it was August 6th or 7th, 2021, when Nimruz was fall down, the first province, we only had one guided rocket in Afghanistan, within Afghanistan, with the Air Force. Only one rocket, and we shot that in Nimruz when the Taliban were entering the governor's office. So we only had one rocket. So this after the deal, we lost the shipments and stuff. Then we could see the increase of the Taliban's attack. So it was the beginning of 2021 when General Sami Sadat became the corps commander for the 215. And I want to help him with the 215. So I was assigned as the J2 director of the JSOC. Then I got another order to go to Helmand to establish a targeting team, a mobile targeting team. So I went to Helmand and I start helping General Sami Sadat moving forward. The Taliban first they increased their attacks on Helmand because Helmand is the 10% of Afghanistan land. They produce 45% of the narcotics for the world, and that was the means of the Taliban support. They were selling and getting money from the narcotic to fight, to buy ammo and weapons to attack on us. So the Taliban focused on Lashkar city or Helmand province and they wanted to overrun the Helmand. So we use this opportunity and we start defending the city. And we fought with the Taliban for over 4 months. They conducted several attacks on the helmet but we were defending. You can see that on the retrograde, the documentary filmed by the National Geography that follows General Sami Sadat. You can see how hard we were fighting. There was days that we had like 5 car bombs on our guys. 5 car bombs in 45 minutes in a row in Lashkar city. But we were still defending and we were still fighting. The Taliban lost like so many people. So for not losing their other fighters, so they were burying these fighters under the sand in the desert. So when it was windy, the dead bodies were coming up, and the Taliban were telling to their other fighters that, hey, your body is in the front line fighting and he is still okay. And you, when they were asking why he is not calling or talking, they were saying like, hey, we cut the telephone lines there because for them not to be found by us.
Wow. So they didn't want anyone to know that they were losing people. They
No.
Because of the morale issue, would that be
Yeah,
the
the
problem?
moral
Yeah.
issue of their personal. They were not telling their guys that, hey, this guy is dead, or they were not telling the family members of their fighters that these fighters are died, and they were not handing over their dead bodies to them.
Wow. That's I'm not surprised. The Taliban are often very deceptive, but I had not heard that before. So this was an intense period of fighting, and when did it cease? When did the fighting stop and you realized that Helmand was in Taliban control fully?
It was the night of 12th of August, and I was the control. I was leading the operations, and I was at the talk when we heard that the Taliban has sent a new unit to break the prison in the Lashkar city, and I was following this unit. We find out that this unit was they arrived nearby to this prison. So this is the time where we are almost done with Kandahar. Orizgon is gone. Nimrod is gone. Farah is gone. Hor is gone. Herat is gone. And every surrounding area of Helmand is gone. It's controlled by Taliban right now. And all these fighters are focusing to come to Lashkargah to take control of Lashkargah. So this raid unit came from north of Helmand, and they are told that they are going to overrun the prison of Lashkargah. So they had told that they had promised that they're going to overrun the prison of Lashkargah. And the Taliban conducted so many attacks on this prison. Like every other day, they were attacking this prison, and they were using car bomb to break this prison. And we had almost about 270 prisoners in the prison. So they were trying to take control of the prison. So, and they were attacking, we had all like 6 locations in the Lashkar city when the Taliban conducted this massive attack of 4,000 people coming to the city at the same time from different directions, like walking into the city, and we were fighting with them. So we could hold the 6 strategic locations in the city. Then one of those locations was this prison that was a stronghold for us, and we had to keep it and fight with the Taliban. So this morning of 13, one of my friends from the Over the Horizon, he sent me a text message through WhatsApp, and he asked me like he sent me a grade location. He need to ask me like, hey, can you confirm if these are friendly or enemy forces? As soon as I checked this grade, it was like 3 meters east of the prison, and I confirmed that these were Taliban, and I told this intelligence, and I already shared this intelligence report with my friends at Over the Horizon in Qatar, that hey, this is what the Taliban planning. And I told them like, hey, these are the guys, you found it, and these are the guys. It's a group of 60. You might see more people coming out of these houses. They have two cars which are full of explosives. First, they want to attack with these car bombs. Then after that, a massive attack going in to get all these prisoners out and killing my guys. So we were able to disrupt this movement and this attack. And unfortunately, the 2 nights before, our supplies were like running out, and we could not get supplies because the Taliban had found the anti-aircraft weapons, and we didn't want any of our aircrafts to get shot. This is why General Sami told the pilots to not fly into the Lashkar because the Taliban were shooting the aircrafts, and we didn't want any of our aircrafts or the crews to die while bringing the supplies for us. And then it was August 13th that we find that we are not going to be able to continue because General Sami was assigned as the corps commander for the special forces, and he had to go to the Kabul, and he stayed in Lashkar for a week, although he was already assigned as the commander for the uh, NSOC.
And so the 13th is when everyone transferred from Helmand. And what was the next step then?
Not from Helm, not all of us.
Okay.
Like we had the core, and the 215 core, which was in shore up, is were there for until August the 18th.
Okay.
They never they stayed there until August 13th. We only left the Lashkar city to come to the core. So our guys were transferred. Then we came to Kabul. While flying to Kabul on the night of 14th of August, we find out through Twitter that General Sami was appointed as the commander of the Kabul security forces. So that we find it through Twitter. We find out that hey, General Sami was appointed as the commander of the Kabul security. When we came to the Kabul, it was like midnight when we arrived to Kabul, and then we went to our HQ. And it's from a military perspective, it is really hard to come from a war zone, not rest, then you have to get another responsibility of defending a city while there is like different units. You have generals, you have the Minister of Defense, you have the Cox or Chief of Staff for the Army, then you have the Ministry of Interior in the Kabul, you have the Director of Intelligence, and all the units which are in Kabul are under any of these guys' control. And you have more than 30,000 uh, soldiers or fighters in the Kabul security forces, and it is really hard to bring them all under one roof and give them like control them from one hand. You know, it is really hard, and that was what we are facing. Like we were calling like, hey, we have a meeting, you have to come here. Then like this 4-star general, like, hey, I'm a 4-star general, I cannot go to a 2 or 3-star general, you know. So this is what happened, that we could not make like this joint effort to control the city. On the August 15, the night of August 14, when we came to Kabul, we find out that I went directly to the talk, and we find out that Kunduz was our security forces left Kunduz at the north and Takhar at the north, and they are coming towards Kabul. So we had to help them get to the Kabul, and we were busy with that. And General Sami, as the commander of the NSOC, we had our commandos and the special forces on that convoy, and we had to support them because JSOC was the commanding of these forces. So we had to help our guys come, although we didn't want them to leave the province, but they left the province and now they are coming. So we had to help them. But in the early morning in the August 15, we received a call from Wardak, which is like 40 kilometers away from the US Embassy in Kabul, that, hey, the Taliban are pushing and attacking us, we want to leave, we want to come to the Kabul. And while we were talking with these commanders, we had an American aircraft flying over Wardak. We conducted the last airstrike in support of Afghanistan Republic government with the US Air Force on that day. It was in Wardak. 6 Taliban fighters were killed, and that was the last airstrike conducted in support of the Afghan national security forces. Then going over, now we are receiving calls from Kapisa at the north that the the Taliban are pushing. We are leaving like Kapisa. Then I receive another call from Parwan that the Parwan was running over. The next call I received was from the Bagram airfield. The Bagram airfield, the prisoners and the Bagram airfield, the guys left the Bagram airfield. We were trying to send General Sami right now is like, hey, we have to keep Bagram, we have to keep Bagram. And then all of a sudden I find out that the Kabul prison is running over. And then when we were trying to send the KKA guys to the Kabul prison, we find out that the prisoners break the prison, and now you have all these 21,000 prisoners, including drug dealers, including ISIS-K, including Taliban, and all these criminals in the streets of Kabul.
Yeah. And I think it's important to mention two things because I would have thought that you would mention this. Bagram Airfield was evacuated by the U.S. in the dead of night. They did not warn you
Yeah.
guys that they were going to leave. And here you are trying to, and I think the Afghan National Army has received a lot of flack in international media for abandoning the country. But the U.S. began that abandonment process, and didn't supply you guys and wasn't doing those things that would have given it's a morale issue. How do you continue to be present and fighting when you've seen, the US just pulled out of nowhere from Bath and left this airfield that would have been the perfect place to evacuate from, where now you have these fighters on the loose, like you say. And the other thing I wanted to mention for listeners at home is that the ISIS-K fighter who exploded his suicide vest outside of Abbey Gate came out of that prison. These are consequences of U.S. failures that, now all of this is being heaped on top of your shoulders as you're trying to keep the country that, you've kept with support from the U.S. for all these years. So I'd love you to continue just the,
Yeah,
play by play.
I was coming to this,
Yeah.
like to this BAF and to this U.S. withdrawal and keeping us in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
So after the Doha Agreement, there was some consequences that we were not involved on it, and we didn't know that this was going to happen. First of all, yeah, we knew about the 7,000 prisoners that we were under pressure to release them, and we released them. They were out, and all of these 7,000 directly went to the front lines and started fighting with us. Then after that, the withdrawing of the 17,000 the contractors who were maintaining our aircrafts, who were maintaining or taking care of our databases and stuff, they were all gone. and we didn't know that these people are going. And then they left the background airfield, and we didn't know it was in the night. They left background airfield, and we didn't know. So, as you were saying before, the ISSK member fighters who suicided outside the Abbey Gate in August 2021, who ended up killing 117 Afghan, including 13 U.S. Soldiers, he came out of the background. And we all know that this is how they abandoned the background, how they left the background, and that is what happened. Now we have this 13 U.S. Secure, like Marines died on that day because of Americans leaving background and leaving those prisoners out in the.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, like you said, they end up in the front lines. They end up all of those
Yeah.
the people who we've had Bill Raggio on here who talks about how the Taliban leadership, several Taliban leaders were in prison and then they're released. And wouldn't you know it, the Taliban leadership of today is the same almost, or the sons of the Taliban leaders from 1990s, early 2000s. The same. They're not. It was unconscionable. I can't even imagine how it would feel for you going through all of this. And so now you've got these prisoners on the loose. I think that was late in August, on August 14th. So bring us through the final day, August 15th, and what that was like.
Yeah, this is August 15th that I'm
Okay.
saying all these prisoners are out of the Kabul prison.
Okay.
And now I'm receiving a call from PD5 of Kabul like, hey, the Taliban are here, we ran over, we are leaving, everyone is leaving. PD5 was like 6 kilometers, which is almost 4 miles from the US Embassy. Then another call from PD8, which is like 3 miles from the US Embassy. Another call from PD15, PD11. All these police districts are going after each other. Then we find out that the PD15, which was outside of in the north of Kabul airport, is gone. It was like 500 meters from the Kabul airport. At the north of Kabul airport is gone. So the Kabul was totally run over. Like when we receive a when oh yeah. So General Sami was around like 1:45 to 2. I don't remember the exact time. Call and he asked like, hey, can you check any Afghan aircraft flying, and can you check all these the president's aircrafts where they are right now? So as soon as I went to the talk and checked the trackers of these aircrafts, we find out that the aircrafts has crossed the border. And I told them like, sir, the aircrafts just crossed the border of Afghanistan. So I told them, then this came to the news. Like 5 minutes after that call, so we had this Tolo TV that I can say are like 15% responsible for the August 15th, because they bring this news and like, hey, the president of Afghanistan just flew out and escaped the country. And this bring a chaos in the city. No one stood up. No one. I could see soldiers. I could see police. I could see ANA, India's guys taking their uniforms, putting in the ground, putting civilian clothes, and not accepting the orders,
Yeah.
just leaving their weapons and going. So by the end of the day, my commander tried to go the Ministry of Defense, and then from there he went to the U.S. Embassy where there was the talk or the Tactical Operations Center led by an American two-star general. He went there and talked to him. Like he told him, like, hey, we can save the city. We can keep the Taliban out of the city. You have this 3,000 soldiers coming here. Give us 1,500 of these soldiers. We're gonna take control of Kabul city. We're gonna keep the Taliban out of the city. We're gonna we're going to help you evacuate safely, and we are going to keep the Taliban out. And the ones who came inside the Kabul, we're gonna clear them. So you could get time and you have a safe passage. But unfortunately, this general had told my commander, General Sami, that you don't have any government. And I got my orders from the Pentagon that I have to evacuate the the US citizens from Afghanistan, and I am going to do that. You don't have a government, and there is not any benefit of helping you guys anymore.
How did that feel to know that that was now the state of things, do you think?
That was the hard thing I could imagine that one like your great ally, your great supporter would have tell you this. Like it's really hard to even think about it. Like your body, the one who was sitting beside you all the time to support you, is now saying that I'm sorry, I cannot help you because you don't have a government.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how I watching it myself. I think the moment like that for me was knowing that the Taliban were providing security later at HKIA, and these people who had killed people I knew, or people who had talked to me, or people who had talked to me who had lost legs in IED attacks, that the Taliban are now doing this. It's like, how can where we lost the logical train at some point, and we just gave up, and it continues to boggle my mind that any of this happened. You were offered to be evacuated around this point too, and you did not
Yeah.
take that up
Yeah, it
initially.
was
So
around 6 o'clock in the evening. I have one of my American friends. He was a major. He called me like, "Hey, Parwani, this is the last call of the mission, and wherever you are, you can come to the Kabul airport with your family, and we are going to evacuate you." I told him like, "No, this is my country. I'm gonna stay here and defend my country. Thank you for your services and thank you for your call, brother. Safe journey." I told this to my friend, and we stayed there. And our HQ was uh, tied to the Kabul airport, so we had a gate to get into the Kabul airport. So we had a route, and I was with my friends in this JSOC HQ, and we're talking with Sami and the other people outside, and we're asking them what we have to do and what we are going to do. And I closed the gate because the Taliban were trying to get in. So I closed the gate for the JSOC, and then I tied the security around us, and it was like 37 of us and in this big place, and we could not hold it because everyone was tired, everyone was like lost, and these people were like just harmed, but I believe they were not able to fight because seeing all these long day and hearing all these bad news, hearing that the president has escaped, hearing that your American buddies are not helping you, receiving a call from one of your partners and asking you to leave the country. It's like no one were on that position of fighting. it was like 37 of us. Then we received a call from Sami. We went inside the Kabul airport. Then from there, we went inside the CIA camp in the Kabul airport. After that, we left Kabul. And I believe leaving Kabul was the hard point in my life. While I was walking to the aircraft, I was feeling like my soul is coming out of my body and my body is just walking into the aircraft. Like I could feel that 3 months prior to this fall of Kabul, my father died. My father died, and I wasn't that upset for him. But when we lost Afghanistan, I was totally lost. Like walking to the aircraft, I could feel that I am leaving everything behind. I'm just a body walking into the aircraft. Just walked into the aircraft, fly the country, went to Qatar. I only had one pair of uniform. Then from Qatar, we came to the United States. Then from United States here, and we landed in Philly. And then from there, we went to New Mexico.
So you were basically back in Helmand, America again, in New
Yeah,
Mexico. You're right near Huachuca and
yeah,
Arizona. And
yeah. When at first when we landed in New Mexico, for a few minutes, I was thinking that I landed in Bastion in Helmand because it looked the same. The train, the aircrafts, and everything. So I was like, hey, I believe I'm back in Helmand. Yeah.
but
And
not
then
quite. What were so? I'd love to get into this. And um, when you arrived, you didn't even get, because some people who came to the airfield might have had a bag with some clothes and maybe some supplies for their children or whatnot. But you had one thing with you. What was the one thing you had with you?
I only had a pair of uniform, and that's it.
And what was that like for you? Being, I mean, everything is
That
back.
is everything, and I have still kept that with myself. I'm gonna carry it with myself for the rest of my life, and I'm pretty sure that one day I'm gonna wear the same uniform back in Afghanistan. So I only had that uniform, and I had to wash it every day because, like during the nighttime, I was washing my uniform, and the next day I was wearing. Then a cousin of mine living in LA, he tried to send some clothing and stuff for us, but he couldn't because he was not allowed to come inside the base. Then he sent money to me. So this is funny. Like you are in a situation and you're asking someone for help. There was a guy. I asked him. He was an interpreter. I asked him like, "Hey, I have a friend, a cousin of mine, sending me money. Would you please help me?" He was like, "Yeah, I can help you, but you have to pay me some." I was like, "Okay, I can pay you." Then this guy, my cousin, sent $500 for me, and then this guy kept $50 for himself to just bring the money for us. And then the situation in the camp that we were in a tent with 400 guys in a tent.
What was that like?
Crazy. You can't imagine like being among like 400 male in that room, like under one tent.
Mm-hmm.
So the days are warm, the nights are cold, and you don't have that much like uh, clothing and stuff to keep yourself warm. And also every day, like for the breakfast or lunch or dinner, you have to stand in a line for like 1 hour or two. Then when you get into the line and you receive food, you're receiving like mashed potatoes with the green beans and white Wow. That was like, I believe, was not giving us that much energy that we need. And you have to stand in this line for almost 1.5 hours to get to that food.
And I want to say, because when we were talking the other day before we started recording, I mentioned this. I think there are a lot of people in the US who just think that anyone, because we have a lot of people in the US who come across our southern border because they're looking for opportunity. They're coming here because it's the land of opportunity, it's the American dream. You did not come here looking for the American dream. And this is not something that anybody wanted, was to stand in line or be in a tent full of 400 people. You guys were escaping an authoritarian regime that took over very quickly in a moment of chaos. You were not here just thinking, oh, I'm going to be rich in America, or oh, I'm going to, that's not the impetus of this movement of people. And it's not the reason that people continue to come to the US. It's because you have to escape the Taliban. Because, I mean, there's a reason you mentioned people changing into civilian clothes. And when Ghani fled the country, there was a picture that went out of the previous, what the Taliban had done to the previous president when they came through. And it was horrifying. And you almost can't, blame him. What was going to happen is the Taliban were clearly closing in, and this was going to happen. We've seen it happen with so many ANSF personnel, with so many people who worked for the US. They've been killed by the Taliban. They've been tortured by the Taliban. I've seen where the daughters of people who worked for us have had their hands cut off. It's barbaric. And I just, it's so important, I think, to tell the real stories of, your feelings when you came here. It wasn't a feeling of, oh, look at all this great opportunity that's in front of me. It was, I have fled my home and now I'm here in this, tent, not knowing what the future looks like. So how long were you there in New Mexico, and what was the rest of that process like there?
So, if I wanted to pursue my American dreams, I came to the United States back in 2014. I stayed here for a year. I had the opportunities to stay here. I could get asylum. It was five of us who came to US and went to the military intelligence training, and I was the only one who returned back to Afghanistan. The four other, they stayed. They never go back. They stayed here. They got married here. They became U.S. citizens, and even one of them became a service member with the same unit. And but we Afghanistan was the only thing and everything we have. I had. I had to go back. I had to serve my country. And coming back to the United States, we didn't choose to come to the United States. We were forced to come to the United States. We were forced to flee because our government was overrun, and the enemies of the people, the enemies of Afghans, came to the power. And as you were mentioning before, like the Taliban did whatever they have done in the back in 90s. They are still torturing, they are still killing, and they are still arresting. You can go and check. There is almost 30,000 Afghans in the Taliban prisoners, including women, men, and most of these men who are in the prison are former ANDSF soldiers that are arrested by Taliban. You have read the UN report about the Taliban killing the NDSF soldiers. That number is like not 100%. It's like maybe 20% that has been reported. Thousands and thousands of our guys were killed. Our brothers were killed in Kandahar, no one reported that. Our brothers were killed in Badachan, no one reported that. Our brothers were killed everywhere in Takhar. We only see the reports coming out of some specific locations, but they killed our soldiers all over the country. So they were not going to say like, "Hey, forgive Parwani or forgive Sami Sadat or any others." You're forced to flee, and we want to return back to our country. This is our hope. This is our wish, and this is what we are working for.
Absolutely. And before you, so I think we're heading towards AUF, but before we get there, I want to talk about something you said the other day about your mental state when you got here, that it was kind of like it was a depression, as you're trying to figure out what's your next step. You went from being the director of intelligence for JSOC, and now you find yourself in a strange US city. I think you were working on refugee assistance, which is a great thing to be doing. I mean, it's an important task. People needed that. But what was your mental state like as you were going through that process?
So when I came out of the camp and started, like, when still being in the camp, I was depressed. I had depression. I couldn't sleep. I can still not sleep. I'm not able to sleep during the night, and it's common for the veterans to have this PTSD and have problems like with sleeping, even talking to the people and the staff. But for me, it was worse because we lost the country, we lost the hopes, we lost everything. It was really hard for me. I started working as a case officer with agency in Pennsylvania, and I was working there, and every day I was trying to somehow help these newly arrived Afghan refugees. But in my part, I had these depressions, anxiety. I was not able to sleep. I was not able to concentrate, and stuff like that.
That's really tough. I mean, and there's nothing. Was anyone able to help you with that when you were having that struggle, or was there no help for that?
Well, as for Afghans, like I know this because I've been through. And when you're talking with an Afghan and saying like, "Hey, I have this mental issue," the only thing that they are thinking is like, "Hey, this guy is crazy." So this moral injury, I believe, I did talk with a psychiatrist about it. When and I see the psychiatrist, we had so many sessions talking with each other, and that helped me. That helped me. But one more thing that helped me a lot was talking to my commander, and when he gives me the hopes of us returning back to the country, that gives me like that bring me back, like that gave me all the energy that I needed, when talking to him. Although I was going to psychiatrist every week and talking to her for hours, but talking to Sami on the phone gave me this purpose.
Yeah, I think it's the hope that maybe all isn't lost. Maybe the country where you told me the other day, like that's where you want your body to go. If you die here, like take me back to Afghan. I mean, that's a really strong feeling, and yeah, there's hope. So let's talk about that. When did you and Sammy reconnect, and were you trying to get him? I mean, there are so many different people spawning efforts to do something to get the Taliban out of power. When did Sammy start on that process?
So I remember it was the second week of us coming to the United States. It was September 21, 2021, and 2 p.m. in the afternoon. We were talking. I was texting Sammy the night before, and he said, "Tomorrow we're gonna have a group call with our other friends, and we're gonna talk what we want to do." So we said, "Okay." And then after that, the day after, we called and we were talking, and we decided that, hey, we have to defend our country. That is our homeland, like right now is controlling by Taliban, and we are the owners. We are the real owners of Afghanistan. That is our country, and we have to go and take it back. It has happened in the past in our country where our empires were defeated, but they came together again and they went and take control of their country. So we started back then, since we all were new here in the United States, some of our friends were in Europe, and we were slow, like we were talking, but still, I wasn't like that much sure, like that much comfortable about this, that hey, this is going to happen. And then I called to Sammy one day when I was like totally lost, and he was like, I was telling him, sir, what are we gonna do, what's gonna happen? He told me like, Parwani, we are gonna start our own front. Just wait for me to come to the United States. When he was in Europe, he start this process of getting us all together and working and stuff to get us all together and start like starting a front is not something that easy that you can do it over the night. It takes like several months for Sami, even a year, to build the front. And I joined, and I have the privilege of being one of the members of this front.
So when did you join, and what state was the Afghanistan United Front in when you joined?
We are here in Washington, in Virginia, Lawton, Virginia, and it was the beginning of 2023 when Sami first came to the United States, and we were I was going back and forward talking to him, meeting with him and helping him while he was going around the country talking to the people. So it was the beginning of 2023.
And what was his? So there are multiple efforts. There's obviously the military effort, the political effort, civil effort. What do those entail, and what state are they in? I guess can we start with the military effort, because they obviously the Taliban are not going to just say we're done. Bye. Thanks for having us. Like there will have to be a military effort to unseat the Taliban, correct?
Yeah, so our goal with the AUF is first, what we want with the AUF, what are we stands for?
Mm.
What are our values? So the first thing, we want to rebuild the Afghanistan Republic government. The second thing, we want to reinforce the constitution of chosen by the people of Afghanistan back in 2004. We want to we want to have a democratic, legitimized government, internal and legitimized for the world, so we can have relations with the world, we can have women rights, we can have freedom of speech, we have the equality for the minorities of Afghanistan. And we want to rebuild the or bring back the national anthem, all the values of the republic back in Afghanistan. So the states of our military affairs, I do not want to talk about that right now, but we're gonna have first our office here in the United States, our political office here in the United States. Here we are trying to negotiate with, have dialogues with the Afghans, talk with each other, bring all the Afghans together to reunite under one flag and to reunite under one constitution order to chosen by the people of Afghanistan.
Sure. How difficult is it to get people on board with, there are so many different competing groups right now, from what I understand. How is it difficult to get people on board, or are people really excited to be part of?
So people like it is difficult because everyone has their own opinions, like the other fronts we're talking about. But some Afghans, like mainly most of Afghans, are really happy with the AUF. And every day, if I told you that I receive more than 50 to 60 text messages, WhatsApp calls, and people are asking for the membership, people are asking for support. But some of the Afghan politicians who have their own way of thinking or still talking and negotiating, and we're talking with them so we can get everyone on board. So it needs some time to talk with the people, and it's we can solve it through the dialogues of talking and negotiating with that. Right now, as we are talking, one of our representative is in Vienna conference, and he was a member of the Vienna conference. So this is how we want to work with the other fronts. We want to be open with everyone, because our aim is to go back to our country, to clear our country from the world's tourism. Right now, as we are talking, 60,000 Al Qaeda members are in Afghanistan. 16,000 Al Qaeda members. The Al Qaeda members, their leaders have a safe passage to come to Afghanistan, go to Iran, and from Iran to Syria, Iraq, and all the way to the Middle East. So we want to clear that from our country. We have IMU, we have TTP, we have Ansarullah. All these groups are operating in Afghanistan. We want to clear them from Afghanistan, and we all have the same idea. But we are working towards getting everyone under one roof so we can operate from the same place.
Sure, a united, like you say, front. And how much of you talked earlier about the 2014 that split in Afghan politics? Is that still there? Is that something that you have to overcome today, or not so much?
Yeah, unfortunately, we fall apart. Especially the politicians, they fall apart. Everyone, like they have divided us based on ethnic, based on the language. We have fronts right now, active fronts that they are following ethnic rules. They are fighting because of their ethnics. I don't want to name the front, but there is a front that is only fighting for the ethnic, and this is how we have been divided.
Sure, and a future for Afghanistan needs to combine all of that. Although, the U.S. tried to do that with these quotas and different things, but I don't think that that was a successful way to get, people of every ethnicity to be part of a system. It has to be something where it's almost like, well, the alternative is the Taliban. So are we going to work together, or are we going to let the Taliban be in control? And that's a pretty strong incentive, I'd say, to put aside those
I
differences.
believe right now we are in a different situation, different condition. The former politicians, they were old school. They didn't have the knowledge. Right now, the leadership of all these France are the young generation of Afghanistan. These young generation, they went to school, they went to the universities, they know the relations with the world, they know everything. And we have a definition from our enemy right now. This young generation, they know their enemy. Unfortunately, as you were saying, the US tried to build a nation. Unfortunately, they were not successful, and there are some reasons, like the different making the government, like bringing the different like ethnics and making this government an effort of like join, but unfortunately that didn't work. Like You have someone sitting somewhere is not allowing for the government to send a governor for that province. And if you were saying this like, oh, I was a commander and I was a fighter, I have this much troop, I want to do this, and that. Yeah, as you were saying, the alternative for the government was Taliban. You're right, because our politicians, everyone was like only thinking about their own benefits, not the benefit of the country, not the benefit of their people, not the benefit of their nation. They were just thinking their own benefits. All those crafted politicians became billionaires, and their followers doesn't have food to eat right now. The ones who were supporting them doesn't have food to eat right now. Still, those people are like, hey, we want to go back. We want to go back. No, you guys are expired. There is this young generation of Afghanistan who knows everything,
Yeah.
who knows how to fight, who knows how to be a politician, who knows how to run the country.
That is the one thing that I have heard from every Afghan who's looking for the future way forward. And it's always the young generation has to be it, because the old generation is stained by corruption. They're stained by the failures of the past. They don't have, like you said, that understanding, that education that the young generation has gotten. And I think you're right. It has to be new. It has to be fresh. And I'm really hopeful that something can work, to
Yeah.
get Taliban rule away and to give women their rights back, because it's horrifying to see what's happening to Afghan women now, that they're being dragged back into not even last century, just it's centuries and centuries ago. It's very sad. What can listeners do if they want to support efforts like AUF? Do you think? What do you guys need?
So we need everything. Like we are new here. We need their supports. We need them, if someone is a writer, to write against Taliban and see their actions. If someone has a podcast, bring the Afghans to talk. If you know people, like you can talk to your congressmen, tell them like, hey, this is what happening in Afghanistan and this is what we are seeing. The women are totally gone right now. Girls are not allowed to go to school. It's 2023, 21st century, and we are in a point that I believe no one else in the history was.
Yep.
So we want these listeners, if they can go and talk to their policymakers, like their congressman, if they are a writer, write about what you hear. See what's happening in our country. And if you want to help us, you're always welcome to come to our office. You can go to our website and check our website. We need support to go back to our country.
And that's my final question for you would be, how is your mental state now that you're part of this effort and that you can see maybe a hopeful glimmer that you can go back to Afghanistan and use all your skills there?
Yeah, after I joined the AUF, now I have a purpose. That every morning when I wake up, the first thing I do, we have a flag outside our office. So the first thing I do, I open the window and look to this flag and remember the promise I made for myself that I want to raise this flag again in Afghanistan. As soon as I see that and I remember that, then I have a good day on that day, and it's totally changed. Now I have a purpose and I'm working for it. I have a sense that we want to go back to our country and this is our goal and we're working for it. And right now I'm totally fine. And I want for my other veteran brothers to find a purpose on their life.
Absolutely. Is that something that you're finding a lot of Afghan veterans are feeling right now? Is that purposelessness and the kind of like what's the next step for me?
Yeah, unfortunately, but right now most of these guys has find out that they have to have a purpose on their life. Like every day, I, as I said, I am receiving calls. General Sami is receiving calls. Our other, my other co-workers here, we are receiving calls, and those are all our ANDSF soldiers, or here in the US or in Europe or somewhere in Asia. They're calling and they are saying like, hey, there is a hope, there is a purpose that we wanna, that you guys has created for us, and we wanna follow that.
I'm glad you can be that for them. And it's really, your story is just really incredible. And I'm glad that, you have that purpose now. And it's really amazing to hear about all the things that preceded the withdrawal from your perspective, because you had such a really intimate view of it. And I just want to thank you so much for coming and sharing all of that here. It means a lot.
Thank you.
Before we close, I want to make the pitch to all of our Afghan listeners that, as always, Michael and I are looking to tell your stories too. So send us an email, send us, a sound document, whatever, a sound file, with anything you want to share about living under the Taliban now, experiencing the withdrawal, or experiencing the period of U.S. presence in Afghanistan and things that went on then. We always want to include your stories in our podcasts. So you can send us anything you like to our show address, which is the Afghanistan Project Podcast at gmail.com. And like I said, Colonel Parwani, thank you for fighting for your country back in Afghanistan and now here from Lorton, Virginia. It's really special to have you.
Thank you.
For everybody, thank you for sharing your time, supporting the people of Afghanistan. And if you've enjoyed this episode, feel free to make sure you're following us on our YouTube page and enabling the notifications so that you get a little ping whenever our future episodes come out. Tasha Kaur, and I hope to see you again soon.